This will be a long one, but I broke it up into 3 individual stories. So I'll keep the about me brief. As you can probably guess from the title, I'm a university police officer in the southeastern U.S. To clear up any misconceptions, I have the same power and authority as any other police officer. I work for a state college and am sworn state police officer. I worked at a municipal office department for a while, but eventually transitioned to a college because the pay and benefits are far and away better, and we get to do more community policing and spend time having positive interactions with the community. We didn't always have time for this in the city because we were running call to call, and it made policing a lot more impersonal, which I didn't like. The university I work for has well over 20,000 students and was founded over 120 years ago. Some of our buildings are a century old or more. I didn't necessarily believe in the paranormal before I started working in law enforcement. In this job, we get out and about and go places that most people don't always go and do things people don't always do. That's how I've had most of my experiences. I'll only cover some of the bigger ones. Number 1. One of the buildings on campus used to be a hospital all the way back during the Civil War and before. It shut down sometime in the early 20th century. The university bought it and converted it into offices. The building is old, so it doesn't have digital swipe card access, and someone has to manually lock the building and every office inside at 10 p.m. daily. We have campus security officers who usually handle this, but if the shift security officer isn't working, a police officer will have to do it. It's common to hear footsteps or doors slamming in the building even when it should be empty. This could be blamed on the old plumbing or something, I'm sure. The thing that's really strange is the second floor. It is part of the lock-up protocol now, not written anywhere but common practice, that you lock up the building floors in order. However, when you finish the top floor, you always go back down to the second floor and check all the doors again. A good 50% of the time, all the doors you just closed and locked up are now unlocked and wide open. Luckily, whoever still stays in the building seems to get his laughs in just by doing it once, because when we re-secure the doors, they stay secured until the morning. I like to think this spirit is just a little bit of a prankster who gets a good laugh watching us go back through and lock all the doors again. Number 2. Sometimes in the early morning hours when call volume starts to dip, we'll go practice clearing buildings. Our buildings have a lot of expensive stuff in them, so we often have people try to break in, then hide somewhere inside when they hear us coming. Sometimes said burglars are armed, so we like to make as much of an effort as possible to practice working as a team and safely clearing the buildings when there's no chance of us getting shot by someone high on meth stealing computers. One officer will go into the building and hide, and the other officers will move in as if they were responding to a burglary alarm and carefully search through the building to find the suspect. We refuse to do it in one of the performing arts centers anymore. There's a cemetery right behind the building, so I can't be sure, but I guess a resident has made their way into the performing arts building. I went in to be the suspect one night, and as I walked through the basement, my flashlight died. Weird, since I had just charged it at the beginning of shift, but not unheard of. I found a light switch and flipped it on, which only turned on one spare bulb. There was basically a circle of light around me and all blackness beyond. Out of nowhere, a pen flew out of the darkness, hit me in the chest, and rolled across the floor. As I looked down at it, a magazine frisbeed out of the same corner and hummed over my head. I immediately radioed for the other officers to come down, thinking someone must be in the building. I pulled out my backup flashlight, found the main switch, and turned it on, and nobody was there. We cleared the whole building, and nobody was there. If they'd exited, they would have set off an alarm. They didn't. The next night, one of my shift partners was doing the hiding. She was tucked back in a janitor's closet when she heard footsteps coming towards her, followed by tapping on the door. She laughed and yelled for us to knock it off. The knocking escalated to banging, so she went over and yanked the door open. Nobody there. She called me to tell me to stop fucking with her, thinking I banged on the door and ran off or something. The rest of us had been standing in the lobby together on the other end of the building the whole time. Number 3. The weirdest one by far. One night, the city police got dispatched to an alarm at a doctor's office. They were all tied up on a couple other calls, so they asked us to respond for them. They didn't want to keep the call waiting for too long, since doctors' offices have things like controlled substances and prescription pads inside, making them popular targets for burglaries. Most alarms are false, but they still didn't want to take their chances and leave someone to ransack the building until one of their units cleared. I responded with 2 of my shift partners, and we checked the perimeter of the building. Everything appeared secure, but we could still hear the alarm going off inside, so we figured it would be best to check inside too in case someone got in and then locked the door behind them. We radioed in to the city dispatch and asked them to get in contact with the alarm company and request a key holder come and let us into the building to clear it completely. Dispatch radioed back shortly thereafter and said a key holder was en route. A couple minutes later, an old man comes walking around the corner and walks up to us. He says he owns the building and he'll let us in so we can check. He seemed like a pretty normal guy, old and very pale, but nothing outwardly strange. He pulls out his keys, lets us in the building, and we go in and clear it. We leave him outside because we don't want to bring an innocent bystander inside in case there is a burglar in there. We clear the building, confirm it's a false alarm, and exit. We go to tell the old guy to reset the alarm, but we can't find him. I radio in again and tell dispatch that they need to recontact the key holder to tell him to come back, reset the alarm, and secure the door. Shortly thereafter, they radioed back and asked me to switch to Channel 2. I do, and have this conversation. University 336 on City Channel 2. University 336, did you make contact with a key holder? We just spoke to the individual we called again, and he stated he hasn't arrived yet. I thought that was weird, but whatever. Maybe there was a mix-up. University 336, 10-4, I'll speak with him when he gets here and figure it out. Shortly thereafter, a completely different guy shows up and introduces himself. He also has a key, so he resets the alarm and locks up the place. Once he's done, I try to get to the bottom of who we talked to. He says that he's the only key holder for the building currently, and he's the owner. I describe the other guy to him and watch the color kind of drain out of his face. He says it sounds like we're describing his uncle, whom he inherited the building from, and whom had died a month ago. He even pulled out his phone and showed us a picture of his uncle, who was 100% the guy we talked to, although he looked older and more haggard when we met him. We honestly thought the guy was fucking with us, but when we went back to the PD, we did some digging and found the uncle's obituary online. It confirmed everything the guy had told us, and the photo matched. The obituary listed all his relatives, and there were no brother or anything listed that could have been who we talked to. I added a call note into our computer record of the call that said, "Access to building provided possibly by spirit of the deceased former owner. Spirit was cooperative, nothing further to report." I take pride in knowing that still sits somewhere in official law enforcement record. There's been more, but I already wrote a novel here, and nothing measures up to those few experiences. I'll never forget the night of August 14th, 2021. I was fishing the river with my friend in a suburb of Minneapolis, St. Paul, Minnesota. We loved coming to this public park to fish because it was quiet and there was a nice sandbar to fish from. The park had a Sioux burial mound about a half a mile from our spot. After fishing for the better part of the day, we decided to leave at dusk. In order to get back to our vehicles, we had to take a trail through the woods, which was about a 5-minute walk. I put a clip-on light on the bill of my hat so we could see the trail. I remember when I first glanced ahead down the trail, I saw 2 circular white lights that I assumed were fireflies. Once we got further down the trail, we were closer to the area where I had seen the fireflies. It was then that I saw a pair of eyes that were either highly reflective from my light or glowing white. It wasn't long before I could make out a body. It was a very large white body on 4 legs, bigger than a wolf, but unnaturally skinny. I couldn't make out any facial features because its eyes were so bright. I wanted to warn my friend, but all I could manage to say was, "There's something there." We had no choice but to proceed because this was the only way back to our vehicles. This thing just stared at us but didn't make a sound. My friend yelled at it to try and scare it away, but it didn't react at all. I yelled at it after she did, and it responded back, mimicking my voice. I honestly questioned myself and thought I was imagining things. So I yelled at it again, and it responded back at the same volume, same pitch, exactly like my voice. At this point, we realized this was not an animal. We both continued on the path in silence, but I maintained eye contact with the creature. I felt like this thing was ready to attack us at any moment, but it just stood there, staring. Eventually, we were out of the woods, and I could no longer see its eyes. We made it back to our vehicles and felt a sense of relief. I asked my friend, "Did you hear that talk back to me?" She said she did, and it sounded like my voice when it responded back to us. If she hadn't heard the voice, I would have assumed I imagined it. We went over what happened, and our stories were the same, except she said the creature had a wolf-like head. After our experience, my friend, who is Hmong, went to see a shaman. The shaman believed it was an evil spirit and performed a cleansing on her. She was still shaken up by the experience for several weeks. I tried to hire a spiritual advisor online, but when I described the experience and asked for a spiritual cleansing of my own, it said they were not available at this time. At the advice of one of my friends, I burned some tobacco and said a prayer that the entity would leave me alone. It took me several months just to feel normal again, but I still think about it on a weekly basis. I tried to do further research and contacted the management at the park. They said the park we went to had ancient Indian remains scattered along the river that were unmarked. They said there were more Indian remains in that park than any other park they managed. I contacted several Native American friends and was told the entity we encountered was a skinwalker. I know skinwalkers are part of the Navajo culture, but from what I read, it checks more of the skinwalker boxes than any other supernatural being or cryptid. Thank you for reading my story. If anyone here has any insight on what this was, it would be greatly appreciated. To say in advance, my granny does not have dementia, Alzheimer's, or anything like that. She's 80, but in good mental health. She likes Sudoku and letter soups. She's always been very magical, with lots of paranormal stories. She grew up in the old country, so magic was a big part of life. And she was very perceptive with paranormal stuff. I can tell you some stories later. A month ago, she had an accident and fell down in the night. She broke her hip and was alone until she was found the next morning. She was operated on and is now recovering, but her body has nasty bruises all over. The guys at the hospital, when she came in, thought that someone had beaten her up and even interrogated her like that was not a regular fall. Yesterday I went to see her, and she told me that That night she saw an old man dressed in a white tunic with gold embroidery standing in a corner in something like a podium. I'm not quite sure what she meant with the podium. And then she fell and didn't remember anything after. She also said she'd seen him twice before, but didn't tell me about them. But apparently she sees him before something happens to her. I was Googling to see if there's some entity that appears and damages people but couldn't find anything. Could this be real, or is Granny getting loco? I went to see her, and I need to put some context in, though, because the story gets weird. My grandma lives with my aunt, and my aunt is, legit crazy. She's 65 and lives with her. Horrible love and job story, 2 suicide attempts, pill abuse, like a really messed up lady. She got married 3 years ago with a hobo she met on Facebook and invited him to live with my grandma. Guy was literally homeless, so there was no chance, and they don't have any money to pay for rent. Long story short, my grandma hates him and accuses him of stealing stuff and being unpolite to her. We honestly don't know what to do for those beings to leave and go live somewhere else. Of course, my aunt expects my grandma to die and live there with her sweetheart. Today, I asked Grandma to tell me more about this weird man, and she told me that she has seen him before, staring at her in the dark, but nothing happened. I said before that she really believes in all magical things, such as spells and stuff. She had told me several fucked up stories. She says that this hobo told her his mother and grandmother were some sort of aboriginal sorceresses, I'm from Latin America, and were into witchcraft and stuff, so that he also knew to do some freaky things. She had told me that a few times before, and I honestly just didn't believe what she said. She told me that night when she fell, she saw the man standing there, looked down, and as she looked up, she saw the hobo's face in a creepy look. She said she felt when her hip broke, the crack. She's absolutely certain that the hobo appeared in this spell being and pushed her and beat her up. I can't believe how it sounds when I write it down. The worst thing is that there's nothing we can do now to kick them out. We're selling the house, but no news so far, and we have 0 evidence to charge them. I'll buy some spy cameras tomorrow. So this happened back in 2016, one night. It was 10 p.m., and in the living room, I was playing on my family computer, and all of a sudden, my dog, who was roaming the premises, started barking. At first, I thought it was a stray cat or something, which is common where I live. After that, suddenly, I hear a voice faintly saying, "Shut up," to my dog. And to my horror, my dog went dead silent, and after 2 seconds, I heard the voice say, "Open the door." Stupid enough, I did, but there was nothing. But the main thing that disturbed me is that the sound was just like my uncle's voice, who was sleeping upstairs in our house. After that, I heard nothing ever like that again, and I even checked on my uncle to confirm that he wasn't playing a prank on me. To this day, I'm still not sure what it was. I live in India, and legends like skinwalkers and wendigos aren't common. Any explanation or same experience? I used to work on a ranch in Central Oregon, an hour from the closest town. It was literally in the middle of nowhere. One afternoon around 7 or so, I was driving back across the desert. The sun was just starting to set, but it was by no means dark enough to see stars yet. I happened to look up for a second and noticed what resembled a star right above a mountain, except it was a little bit bigger and brighter than a normal star. It looked like it was shaking a little bit too. Then all of a sudden it dropped down a little ways quickly, then shot up into the sky even faster and disappeared. For some reason, I never even thought twice about it, but I still have the memory clear as day in my mind. Anyways, a week later, when I got back from work at my boss's other ranch, she tells me the news about a mutilated cow out on the desert. around 7 miles or so from the highway, and like I said, an hour away from any town, down a road that's more rough than you could imagine, was a cow that had mysteriously died. There were no tracks around, no drops of blood to be found anywhere. A perfect square slice of skin taken from the belly, the genitals and tongue were cut clean out, and a hole in the chest where I'm guessing they took the heart. I can't even explain the eerie feeling you get around the water trough where the cow died, even to this day. My horse wouldn't even go anywhere near where that cow was. The police came up and looked at it, but it was a few days later and they never got any leads. This has been going on for years and years, dates a ways back. Cows dying in mysterious ways and not one person has ever been caught for it. I didn't even think about how I'd seen the UFO a few days prior, but when I did, I finally put two and two together, and I still believe that's what was behind it to this day. Although there are many theories about what killed that cow, it happened to the neighbors the next year, too. Background information. My room is in a basement because we have a large family and a smaller house, so my window is right on the ground. My bed is right under my window. My window isn't usual glass. It's very thick and I can't see through it well. It's snowy where I am, so you can hear the crunching of the snow. I have bad anxiety, ADHD, and I've also been thinking I might have paranoia and/or psychosis, all going unmedicated due to health issues I had in the past. So it's a possibility I'm just hearing things and overthinking. There's no pattern I've noticed to it yet. I live in the countryside on a hill near a river somewhere in the southwest of New York. My stepmom has lived here far longer than I have, as I've only been here for about 3 years now. So lately, I've been hearing walking outside of my window, usually around 12 a.m., and then again in the same direction around 1 a.m. or 11 p.m. I never look through my window in time to see anything. It sounds like a human pace, but no one in my house is outside when I hear the sounds. One time it sounded as if it was running. I've also never seen footprints. I'm not sure if this is my imagination or something more. Has anyone had a similar experience? If so, information would be useful and appreciated. I'll be updating with more possibly useful information. Comment. I used to hear footsteps outside when I would be going to sleep and wake up hearing them when I was growing up. I even heard the footsteps when I would stay the night at friends' houses or with cousins, sometimes running as well. I told my mom and dad, and they took it semi-serious. They checked each time I would tell them I heard it. My dad even stayed outside one night, and when I heard it, there was nothing there. It took me a long time to not think I was haunted, but instead, I figured out that it was me hearing my own blood/heartbeat in my ears as I would lay on my side. The running was my heartbeat increasing because I was scared. Every now and then I pay enough attention to myself falling asleep that I hear it again and I have to lay on my back because it was so traumatizing to me. I can't even have scratchy, noisy pillows or pillowcases. They have to be soft and noiseless. I hope this helps, but hopefully explains it. It's a real thing, being able to hear your body working from the inside. There's a name for it, but I can't remember it. Okay, this is a series of events I haven't pieced together until last summer, 2021. So, when I was younger, around the age of 10 years old, we visited for the third time in my life, and the first time I remember clearly, my grand-aunt Eugenia's house in Aigio, Greece. This time was the first we visited, and she wasn't with us anymore. She had passed away. That summer I remember it very vividly because I had constant dreams of her visiting me and lighting up the holy candle that was hanging over my bed at night. It was something she used to do when we were visiting because at the time there was faulty wiring in my room, so we didn't use any of the plugs, and the candlelight also worked as a nightlight, so I wouldn't stumble on any furniture when I get up to use the bathroom. Usually after those dreams, I would wake up to find the holy candle lit or slowly going out since it was morning. That summer was also the first time I was allowed to explore the neighborhood with my 5-year-old sister, but not as far as we would have liked. But one evening, my dad and my Aunt Helena had a fight, and when Dad gets angry, he leaves and goes for long walks. It's something he does to calm himself down. That evening, I heard the fight, and I wanted to console him, so I quickly ran after him. We walked around the neighborhood in our PJs and flip-flops as we enjoyed the sunset and the sea view. We had, as we talked about, various things but the fight. On our way back home, after Mom called my dad, we passed the house on 39th Constantinople Street. I remember it looked so jarringly familiar that I froze before it, and my dad unknowingly kept pulling as we were holding hands. I didn't know why it looked familiar, so I pushed that memory aside. Years go by, and it's 2018, and we are visiting the house again. This time I've had an anxiety attack that was so bad, Mom suggested I remove myself from the house, where was the thing that caused my anxiety, aka my phone and social media. And I listened to her, left my phone, wore my shoes, and I left the house. Just as I was trying to shut the door in my frantic state, Dad stopped me, saying I shouldn't be alone now, so he tagged along. We walked the same route as all those years ago. My anxiety attack slowly faded away, and we sat by a bench enjoying the sunset when I finally calmed down completely. On our way back, I saw the house again, and this time I was sure it looked familiar because I had seen it in a dream, yet I couldn't pinpoint the dream. I would visit this house many more times during the summer of 2018 and 2019, trying to make my mind recall the dream. It was summer of 2020 when I was talking on the phone, and since on the street we have better cell phone signals, I was pacing around the neighborhood when I heard music coming from down the street. Now, keep in mind, this neighborhood is located above nightclubs, and it was summer. Music is always present, either by the nightclubs or because many of the houses in the area are summer homes and everyone has windows open. But this music didn't fit in. It sounded like it was coming from a gramophone. While listening to my friend rambling, I started following the music, and the moment I stopped before the house, the music stopped. I jumped when I heard the sound of glass breaking that came from the balcony of a house next to the one I was staring at. I shook my head, thinking again that it came from a different house, and the sound just spread out. Summer 2021, I'm walking down the same path with my dad as a leisure walk this time, and we are discussing architecture of the early 20th century when Dad stops before the very same house and points out how the house looks old, but the terrace looks relatively new, maybe 1950s. That was when I automatically correct him, saying that the terrace is older, but the renovation might have been around the 1950s. He looked at me confused, wondering how I knew that, but I just shrugged and pointed lamely that the brick that the whole house was covered in was exactly the same, but the railings were different. If they hadn't stored the bricks to use later, it must have been built all at the same time. Dad gave up after that, saying that I was right, and we kept walking. As we were walking, a small breeze blew, and I heard the gramophone music again. That was the moment I remembered the dream. The dream was of me watching some young girls around early 1910 walking towards that house as music from the house was able to be heard all the way down the street. I didn't know who those ladies were, but they were in their late teens or early 20s. I watched them entering the house that looked in very good condition, not as abandoned as I grew up watching it in real life. I remember I followed those girls inside the house where there was a party happening. That was when I realized the time period. It was a send-off party. The eldest son of this household was going to fight in World War I, and all his friends and family threw him a party to say goodbye. They were quite rich, judging by how the house was decorated. I remember watching a couple in that terrace looking at the sky and talking about how fragile life is and that when the war ends, the man should marry the girl. And the girl told him to not make promises he can't keep because life is unexpected. After that, I felt myself being pulled back, and I found myself watching the house, and this time I saw my grandma and great-aunt Eugenia standing outside of it, holding each other's arms, and I wanted to yell out to them to say hi, and I was there when I realized they couldn't see me. I had no body, I was just watching everything. Judging by how old my grandma and grand-aunt Eugenia were, I would say it was around the early 1950s, and I could see construction happening around the house. My grandma and her sister asked what they were fixing to the construction worker, and he answered they were fixing the railings because the granddaughter was bringing her fiancé from Australia and the wedding would take place at the house. Grandma and her sister commented about how happy they were for the granddaughter to finally be settling down and wished the construction worker good luck before leaving and continuing their stroll. I followed them, but I kept feeling pulled back, and I was screaming for my grandma to hear me. The last thing I heard was my grandma talking to her sister about the job she took in Pella as a teacher and was wondering if it was worth it to be this far away from Aigio, their hometown. After that, I was pulled back into the house, and it was now abandoned, and I couldn't get out. I was crying and slamming my fists against the main door. Something else scared me after that because I had jumped awake and I was crying in my sleep. I have no idea what was that, but after I recalled the dream, I went back and started staring at the house and wondering why I watched this dream when I was about 10 years old. I haven't watched a dream about that house ever since, but I feel a pull towards that house, and I don't know why, especially the terrace. Any ideas what might have caused all these experiences? Hello, little Vickies. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed yourself, please subscribe and hit the like button, as it's very helpful to my growth here on YouTube. If you have a suggestion or would just like to say hello, please leave a comment. I always reply. If you have a story of your own you'd like to share and possibly have read on the channel, send it to me at veronica45stories@gmail.com. Link is also in the description, as are other ways to support the channel if you're so inclined. I post every Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday by 5 p.m. Pacific. Thanks so much for being here. I appreciate it beyond measure. And until next time, be good.